I will just tell you from a teacher perspective. So I'm going to give you a quick, I think, school leader canned answer, hopeful answer is every teacher is so awesome. They can differentiate within. They can differentiate for the lowest student in the room and the highest student in the room. And I would say that, and I think most teachers would be like, no, that's so much harder. And it is. Teachers are amazing. They are like the most wonderful people that there are, obviously. But that is really hard to do. And so I actually think having a program that was uniquely different gave some breathing room for our teachers to know, yes, that kid is able to use that piece of their brain, even if it's just that little sliver of the week that I can't get to in my room.
Welcome to the BJU Press Teacher Edition podcast, where Christian educators are encouraged and inspired as we bring you interviews, practical ideas, strategies, and answer your questions about teaching in today's culture. And here's your host, Jenny Copeland.
Welcome back to all of our listeners, and welcome back to Lauren Morrison. We are picking up where we left off, talking about supporting gifted students in Christian schools. Lauren is the director of academics at Grace Christian School in Sanford, North Carolina, where she oversees K-12 academics, the Learning Support Program, and the Academically Intellectually Gifted, or their AIG program. In part one, we talked about what a gifted program looks like, what inspired the program she oversees, and what it took to launch that program. We also started talking about who qualifies for this type of program. We still have a lot more ground to cover. So Lauren, are you ready to jump back in?
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay, let's do this. So we have discussed what the program is and who qualifies, basically. So I guess my question now is this a lifetimers club, or do students get reevaluated every year? Can a student, I hate to say it this way, but can they become ungifted or untalented? How does that work, or how do you approach it?
Sure. Okay. That is a great question, and one that we have every year. I try to address that on the front end. So when you first get into the program, you are kind of there until our program sort of ages out, and it just ages out just because of lack of capacity at our school to continue it on. I hate to say that because I know that's what a lot of schools do. I hope this is not the forever answer, but once they start kind of hitting those higher level classes and coursework, kind of towards the end of middle school, that's when our program phases out. Not that the gifted or intellectual skills go away. So I think kids start gravitating in different areas, but I would love to see the program continue past that, just for logistics and the capacity we have, it does not. So I shared kind of between grades 3 and 6 is our primary grade level. Once you get into the program, because we have looked at that cognitive or that IQ score, it usually stabilizes around 8, but not always. So that's kind of where, when you assess even earlier than that, you might run into, and the assessments are definitely valid. I'm not saying that they're not. You can get a preschool assessment, and it is norm referenced and it is solid. But because of different things happening and stages of development, typically that IQ is going to stay that same score, and it should stay probably, within like this confidence interval of 95%, that it would fall in that same range if another assessment was given later in life. Because we have that as such a high piece to our qualification, students are in and they're in. Now, as we have grown, we have just finished our 3rd year of the program, as our school year is nearly done. I have started to notice, and I've started wanting to add a layer that I did not originally add, just growth and development as we've moved forward. And I am always looking back at that achievement score. And I say I'm looking at it as a qualifier for the program, but I'm looking at it kind of for multiple reasons. I'm looking to see, is our program working, if you will? Like, do we have high achieving kids based on a high cognitive ability, maintaining as a high achieving kids? Because lots of times that's what starts to fall down. That achievement score starts because they're already so much higher than the other kids, that them growing, and you'll hear this. I feel like this is a myth. You will hear teachers say, well, the high kids are hard to move. And so, not to go back to what we talked about last time, but that's not true. They shouldn't be, if they're provided the right instruction that's using where their brain is and moving it forward and not just keeping their skills here. So I always look back at those. Again, we use the NWEA map. Different schools use different things, but I'm looking back at that achievement score to see that it is maintaining at like the 80th percentile or higher. I am looser on the maintenance side, if you will, than the qualification side, because I know that's an assessment on one day and one moment in time for a student. So I'm not going to, oh, you're no longer an AIG because you scored on the 79th percentile on the math test you took in January. That's going to cause questions and make me want to reevaluate programming and things of that nature, but it is not an exit from the program. So we've never had a student actually not remain eligible for the program thus far in our 3 years. And again, I think it's because we're just so proactive and attentive and intentional on the front end. So I think when you do that, when you do that, you're going to have better success rate as they move through.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really helpful. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the program. So talk us through the details of the program you have there as an example for our listeners. So what does the scope of your program look like? You talked a little bit about the age, and you touched a little bit about what are they actually doing in the class, but just kind of if you can talk us through the scope of it, that'd be great.
Okay, so one strand that is looked at on the planning side as far as kind of scoping through third grade and then fourth, fifth, and then even sixth grade moving into the program, we definitely have like grade level standards in front of us. But we use that not because we're trying to teach or get mastery of those standards, because for the most part, those kids already got that, or they got it day one when they learned, area in the fourth grade, and they're talking about area. And so they're coming into AIG and it's like, hey guys, we all know what area is. Yes, we know what area is. Okay, so yes. Okay, so we're going to create a blueprint of our dream home. And I need to know the area of every single thing in that house. I need to know before I go buy this L-shaped couch that it's going to fit in the room. So they are more creating, they're taking a skill that they've heard, and this is very intentional, because when they go back into that room and they're sitting in the math lesson as the fourth grader, because they're still receiving almost all of their instruction, it's relevant, and it doesn't keep them in this space that's like, oh, fourth grade math doesn't matter. No, it matters because you're a fourth grade student. But they just, again, what I said on the last episode, they used their brain the way God gave it to them, and they had fun with it. They didn't really feel like they were learning, and it didn't feel like more area problems. I'm just giving you that as an example. But they actually were doing all of that skill at a much higher level. And then coming back, and lots of intentional conversation with, oh, everybody, we're doing area. You guys talked about this in class. And not to minimize that was easy for them, but just getting to use their brain. It's really paying attention to that and what you're shaping in that narrative to the student. Piggyback to, in the scope, intentionally building just that strand. And it cannot just be teachable moments, although it feels like it mostly is, of interpersonal skills and social skills, because they're in their room. And it's not, they're in the cool kids club by any means. It's, hey, God made us all different. Isn't this awesome? We can do this blueprint for area. When you go back to fourth grade math, it is a lot of even social skills of, we're not going to say, oh, this is just easy. Oh, you should be able to do this. It's easy. So there's a strand of like a social, emotional, interpersonal attention that has to happen. Even pieces like, okay, a one project building of things, I think, is in that scope and sequence that's happened. So a lot of work like on one unit on logical fallacies, and it actually starts in third grade and it builds through all the way up into fifth and sixth grade. And in sixth grade, it's like now, this year with presidential election stuff, the sixth graders who have been talking about logical fallacies kind of since third grade, and this isn't like we talked about logical fallacies for months on end. It's just like a one unit quick. They pretty much remember all of the things. Now they can listen to public speakers. And they actually looked at different news articles of different things and kind of were able to draw those conclusions there. That's and evaluate that and make their own opinion. And it was awesome to see the progression that started out as third grade, just kind of learning what they were, and then being able to. They actually around fourth and fifth grade, they came up with different things like, should private school teachers get paid more? And so then there was like a debate. But then they would also have to call out a fallacy that was used. So it's just progressed into a real effort of evaluation. And that's kind of how every strand has kind of come through with the program. There are specific days for like attention with math, specific days that are intentional for reading or language arts or speaking and listening skills that moves through from third grade through sixth grade. And then we also have days that we just call like the intellectual days. And so the kids that go on those days are those kids who have that 95th percentile or higher. And a lot of that is really even like puzzle work and STEM work, kind of bringing it all together. A lot of project base happens on those days.
That's fantastic. And that really helps to explain the scope and how they're attending by different strands and different things they participate in. So I want to jump off a little bit on something you said, because I think many people think that a gifted program is just getting to play.
Yes.
You know, they're smart. They don't need regular instruction. So instead, they're going to, build towers made out of marshmallows and toothpicks or whatever. So can you dig into that just a little bit more? Like, what do the actual services and instruction look like? If you can give a specific example. You shared a couple of building a blueprint, things like that. Are there any others you can share?
Yeah, so I would definitely say I understand what you're talking about. I told you this on the last episode. My son, who kept wondering why he wasn't in there, he actually said, and words mean everything, perspective is everything. He said, well, if you're an AIG, you just get to go on field trips and it's awesome. And so definitely that seems to be the case. I would say back to kind of what I said, I think the intent and definition of the program and articulating that on the front end has prevented some of that skewed
good thinking,
mythological kind of thinking here at our school, because they really understand that. And they kind of even are like, maybe I don't understand it, but I know it's different. So they're okay with it. It's like they've kind of accepted that answer. The instruction is definitely more project based. So for example, I'll give you an example, like in reading a novel, instead of just reading or having higher level vocabulary, the novel took on a character. It's actually a BJU medallion is the novel, if any other Christian schools are familiar with it. So they took on the reading of the novel. Lots of that happened. All of that actually happened outside of the classroom. And it was kind of treated more like a book club, which I guess could feel more like play. But to be able to articulate stance on an opinion on things and defend that is higher level thinking. So that's kind of that instructional side that the teacher was planning. They did a owl pellet dissection with that, because they started tying in the anatomy of the birds of prey and different types of birds and all of that. So it kind of just starts going in these other, I think the piece is that the lesson just morphs into so much more. So they dissected owl pellets. We brought in a gentleman who owns birds of prey, and we took them to the gym. Now for this day, we opened up for our whole school. So obviously, I think that was a layer too, where the AIG kids could understand the anatomy of the birds and why they did. Why they were doing, I felt like I couldn't even carry on a conversation with the group that day. They were beyond my scope on knowledge there. But just taking that layer, if that answers your question. And we brought all of our kids in so they could enjoy like seeing how the birds fly and that sort of thing. But these kids were really diving into far deeper things that kind of transcend beyond just the bird itself or just the novel itself. So I would say that's an example of how we try to capture how that instruction is different. Never more instruction, just different.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So quite often I've heard that gifted programs aren't needed in Christian schools because their program is already advanced and it's challenging enough. And in all honesty, they likely are more challenging than most public schools. We would expect that, for a number of different reasons. But how is talk with us about how is this gifted program different? Like what is setting it apart? And I think probably if I would ask listeners, they're piecing that together.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's still the thought, okay, if I'm going to put money and I'm going to hire people and I'm going to pull people out of class, like what sets it apart from the challenges and opportunities that they could get in that regular classroom? What do you think?
I would say that oftentimes I think that we think in that space because we think we should be different, we should be maybe smaller, and we should be able to differentiate more. But I will just tell you from a teacher perspective. So I'm going to give you a quick, I think, school leader canned answer. Hopeful answer is every teacher is so awesome. They can differentiate within. They can differentiate for the lowest student in the room and the highest student in the room. And I would say that, and I think most teachers would be like, no, that's so much harder. And it is. Teachers are amazing. They are like the most wonderful people that there are, obviously. But that is really hard to do. And so I actually think having a program that was uniquely different gave some breathing room for our teachers to know, yes, that kid is able to use that piece of their brain, even if it's just that little sliver of the week that I can't get to in my room. So I know when I was in the classroom, I was a general education teacher for just a very short time. And I knew coming from special ed, I leaned into the kids who struggle. And if you were to really ask teachers honestly, they probably could tell you, I lean to the ones who struggle, or I lean to those kids who feel high. And that's probably where they're leaning. Let's be honest, in their differentiation. Right. And your student is in different teachers' classrooms throughout the year. So that's 100% why something uniquely different was so critical for me. And our head of school was in full support. Something uniquely different like we have for kids who struggle with reading. You can support them. You can differentiate down like a reading or a skill-based task. Sometimes it seems easier for teachers to differentiate down. I might say that because I lean that way, like I just said. But you have to still pull a kid out who's like a fourth grader who is at word level struggle with reading. You're never going to be able to differentiate down in a core classroom to that level. So those kids are often pulled out. And I think because that stands out more as like a block to get to the next step, attention is given to that more. Hence why there's more programs that serve that population of student than the other side. And not that it's one side and the other side. I don't mean it like that.
We get it.
Just for conversation's sake. So I think that in our program, it is uniquely different in that the teacher who we have, our AIG teacher, she's pulling them out of the room. So they are in that small group and they are actually in a different room of the school. I know in private schools, it's hard to find an extra room that's just not being used. But we made that important at the beginning. So we've made that happen. So they actually are pulled out in a small group for their instruction, and whether it be tailored to reading, math, or like that intellectual day that they get to have. That's what that actually looks like. It's for about 45 minutes, just to give you kind of more specific information, depending on what that kid qualifies in. So we will have kids who kind of have that high intellectual ability. They kind of could go all over the place. I still they have to have that high achievement score, because going back to that example about the fourth grade math area, the kid can have a high IQ, but if he's actually not even performing at that level and his achievement isn't high enough, he's not going to come to math, because the math itself may frustrate him since he doesn't have like a general
that makes
awareness.
Sense. Yeah.
So when they go to their group, whether it be math, reading, or like an intellectual pull, and we kind of play around with that. That doesn't always look the same, and we've kind of changed that over the years. But the intent was to kind of focus on a kind of a logic-based, skill-based STEM kind of collective day for them. But when the students go out for whatever they qualify in, some students go for all of the days of the week. Some go just for the math day. Just depends on all of those assessments kind of coming together and where we found them eligible. They are out of the room for that.
So you started to talk a little bit about the regular classroom teacher. So let's talk about how this type of program intersects with families and the regular classroom teacher. So I'd venture to say that there will need to be investment and partnership with both. So I'm thinking time and scheduling, even maybe a cost for parents. So how do you involve families and teachers in supporting these children within the program? How does that work?
Family involvement is pretty limited. It has grown, and I want to see that continue to grow. But where it stands right now is we kind of have like a service plan that's individualized to the student. So some people are familiar with like an IEP.
Sure.
It kind of is a similar thing. It identifies at the beginning of the year, the parents get a wealth of information when they are entered into the program. These are the scores. Sometimes that looks like a talking through of the scores. Sometimes that looks like, oh, this is awesome. And then that's the end of it. And then there they are. But we send home, our AIG teacher sends home monthly newsletters just to kind of get them to know what we're talking about, because we obviously want to foster the continued conversation. The kids are going home and talking about different things, and they may talk about what sounds like just a game or playtime. It may come out like that. So she's also sending home information that's supporting like why we did this.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, so that happens kind of on a monthly. The individualized plan is written for every student. So one, it serves the purpose of capturing like kind of the just cause, like they're in here because of this is the qualification, this is where they met, here's the data. Now it's harder to quantify how the program is working. I've had parents ask, how will I know because they're paying an additional cost, just to put that in there. How do I know that this program is working? And so sometimes that's easier with a skill-based deficit. I have data. I can show you they were here.
Right.
Now they're here.
Makes sense.
But for this program, for AIG, that is more difficult. And I say to the parents just that. You're right. This is going to be more difficult to quantify. And I put that out there as full transparency. Builds trust equity. And I think that's like the biggest piece of where we're at. You've probably been hearing me allude to that kind of throughout. But I would say that we have a plan. We identify strands that focus on strengths-based. So I would say for gifted students, you could argue this for all students, moving in a direction where instead of finding the hole and weakness of how we want to improve, we move into a direction of identifying the strengths in the person and wanting to push those. And I think that is a biblical worldview. I think that
Sure.
is taking who God created you to be and making you the best version of that for kingdom building. So these individualized plans that get sent home, we send them home throughout the year. That's our kind of our parent involvement, where they can see so they have newsletters kind of showing what they're working on, just so that they have that piece at home to collaborate with and come alongside of. And then they have almost like a report, if you will, that's kind of set beginning, middle, and end of the year. And it has quantifying information, it scores, but then speaks to the quality of the student. And the teacher is just wonderful. She just puts in things about the kid that it's like, it just is awesome. I read one the other day, and the little guy always talks a lot, talks, but he just is like, his brain's just going 100 miles an hour. And I think she made the comment in his, he's working on waiting his turn to talk and share his ideas. But she just crafted it in such a way, having that right teacher. The teacher is such a huge piece of the
makes all the difference.
It is the huge piece of the curriculum. So we have that gets our families involved with our teachers. Because we've been doing this a couple of years, we're in a much better place than we were. Lots of just trying to get them to understand what type of student it is. And we circle back to that. We meet with our teachers at the beginning of the year, kind of as a collective, any teacher who's going to serve any student in that grade level. And then we also have our AIG teacher collaborating with them regularly. I would love to see it progress into some more teacher involvement that would even include, and I'm just waiting for the opportunity. Implementation is so critical to do this and not scare people off. But even have opportunity for some like accommodations to be built in for students who are in our program, much like students in like a learning support program. And so this might look like, hey, if they can already answer, it's kind of that typical, the last three questions in the math that are those higher level thinking, then they don't really need to show their work on 1 through 5. And that will freak out some teachers. Some really like to have their things. But it all comes to how you bring staff along, I think. So that's a huge piece.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I know we're getting close on time, and I haven't known you very long, but I can sense you have a passion to push Christian education forward in this area, in training teachers and giving students excellent opportunities for growth. But as we close out this episode, what is ahead? Are you where you want to be, or what do you have in hopes for the future of your program?
Yes. Okay. Always pushing and growing and all of the things and all of the areas. I would say that hopes for the program is to continue to provide a unique opportunity outside of just honors classes for some of our older students. That would be something I would love to see. I would love to see for the program to continue to develop how we get our students in the program to view themselves. So that layer of like that plan that's sent home to parents, I am growing in that there's more student involvement with that. There just hasn't been a lot of time for that, but I think we need to carve out intentional time for that. Interpersonal skills have happened, yes, but them really understanding and being able to have buy-in and move forward with that, I think that would be great. I also would love to see the program include that other layer, a little bit more collaboration with that core content area teacher, because it can tend to feel like, oh, this is great, and there is some collaboration, but what happens in that room, and when they're here, and I need the student to be this way. So just making sure just that inclusive piece of bringing that back into the classroom and shaping that is a goal and vision I still have for the program. And I think we're getting there, just forward moving with that.
Takes time. Yeah, takes a lot of steps. Lauren, this has been enlightening. You have done just an incredible job creating the program there. And now today you've inspired others to do the same. I just want to say kudos to you for your work, but also thank you so much for squeezing us into your schedule, really so that others can be encouraged. And hopefully they're leaving motivated to go offer their students at their school some of these same incredible opportunities, really to develop their talents. God has given them these talents, and this is an opportunity for them to develop those. So it has been such a privilege having you on the show here today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And listeners, thank you also for joining us today. I hope you are signing off with a to-do list. Start thinking, praying, and working on how you too could come alongside these students. They need our support, and what better place than in a Christian school environment. So as we close out for today, remember to go to teachereditionpodcast.com to learn more about the show and to submit your questions for upcoming episodes. We need more great questions like today's question. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on social media. Now it's time to get back to your day. But it's not just any day. Every day in the classroom is your day to impact and inspire through God's power and also through His grace working in you. Go do what God has called you to do.